I bet at least one of you thought, it's about darn time, when Dave called my name today. I am and have always been extremely hard-headed. And like pretty much every teenager ever, I was very difficult and was not at all interested in listening to what my parents had to say because I knew that they didn't know what it was like to be me. I was sure they didn't know anything at all. But I needed someone to remind me that God loved me and had a plan for me. But my parents were not in a place to deliver that message when I needed it. My parents had both closed their eyes to their faith by the time I was a teenager, while they were trying to deal with my mother's cancer and subsequent survival and the toll that that took on their relationship. So when all of the behavioral problems associated with being sexually abused as a small child began to manifest themselves in my teenage behavior, my parents were unable to see what was happening. They couldn't know what they couldn't know about me. I was exceptionally strong-willed then, and the solution to keeping me out of trouble seemed to be to keep me as extremely busy as possible. So I had advanced activities in classes and in extracurricular activities. I had a part-time job, and I was required to volunteer as well. And I think I maybe got about 4 hours of sleep a night, and I wonder how I ever survived then. During that time, coaches and teachers and parents alike pushed me to continue to work to be better at everything that I was doing. And they fed in me a competitive nature. And it has been great for my personal life to have learned to work very hard to have what I have. But that has been a huge stumbling block in my forming a true and meaningful relationship with the Lord. But at a time in my life when I needed it the most, no one, not once, mentioned God to me. Even my favorite teacher, a man who I know has an extremely strong and proud relationship with the Lord, never said to me, God has a plan and he loves you. And so I was able to foster an apathy for the Lord that began as an out-of-sight, out-of-mind consequence. Despite having spent a lot of time in church as a small child and knowing the fellowship of that community. At the age of 18, when I began to remember memories from my childhood trauma that I had repressed, I recall being afraid in a way that I had never been in my life. And not knowing whether what I dreamt was real or was just a nightmare that was just part of the landscape of my life. And when I finally realized that I wasn't just dreaming, not only did I continue to feel pain, but I felt shame, and I had nowhere to turn with that. So like with a lot of other things in my life, I just set it aside and said, no, I'm not going to deal with that. Because that's the easy thing to do. I was already dealing with depression and anxiety that were fueled in part by the repressed memories, but also by the pressure I placed on myself to please those people around me, to make my parents proud, to win that trophy at competition, to outspeak every other Model UN student. I was fueled by the desire to please everybody else. And by not facing my pain and shame at that time in my life and continuing to let that emotional damage fester inside of me, I found myself to be extremely unhappy and insecure and looking for love and affirmation in every single wrong place that the world has to offer. It began with promiscuity and then heavy drinking, working myself nearly to death just to keep myself from having the time to think about what it was in my life that I wasn't satisfied with. And then came drugs. Putting things into my body to try to make myself happy. And also to try to stay up and fuel myself for all of the other self-destructive behavior that I just had to be engaged in. But inside I was dead. And I had gotten to a point where I used other people for everything that they would give me. Yet I was too cold to give anyone any part of myself. And then I met Josh. And without even meaning to, he melted what was cold in me and showed me a different kind of love. And for those of you in this room who've heard his testimony, you know that the first few years of our life together was difficult at best. But those years gave us our daughter. And Kerrigan is the evidence of God working in my life. She is the evidence that he has the final say, because she was not supposed to exist. But I still did not truly know the Lord yet. And when Josh was gone from my life, I found myself needing affirmation again, because I didn't want to deal with what I felt about losing him to his own demons. And that made me an easy target for an abuser. But the years that I spent in torment have honed me into the woman that God intended for me to be. And that had not fully occurred to me until I began coming to church at Park. It's been 18 months. And it's been the best 18 months of my life. At Park Baptist, I've met so many men and women and children who live for Christ and love each other the way that he intended for us to. And there's light here. And it is here that I've finally felt at home. And while coronavirus has forced us to spend less time together this year, I can always count on Rachel Brazell sending me an encouraging text message in the exact moment that I need to hear the exact words that she has to say. Or Janice having on a really cute pair of shoes so that I have something to talk about, because I'm socially awkward after spending 4 months working in my basement with no windows and no people to talk to. And so many of the other moms here who always have a smile for me when we talk to each other, despite the chaos existing in their own lives. And it is here that I've learned that unlike every single award I've ever earned through my own blood, sweat, and tears, it is only through Christ that I am set free of the bonds of my sin. It is here that I finally found myself and found the woman that God has made me to be. And she does not need to be perfect. She does not need to win any awards, because he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed.